The couple Sarah and John Winter, who are expecting a baby, are decorating the nursery. They don't yet know if it will be a boy or a girl. Sarah teaches mathematics at the university, while John works as an architect. His ex-girlfriend Alyssa Hayes also works at the same firm. She clearly still has feelings for John, but he has made it clear that it's over between them. After work, while playing the piano at home, Sarah felt sharp pains and called her husband, but he didn't answer, occupied with clients. When John saw the many missed calls from his wife, he rushed to the hospital immediately. Sarah had to give him the sad news: she had lost the baby. Now the sight of the nursery in their home brings them pain. The couple is struggling to cope with this loss. Sarah said she can't stay in this house. John understands her feelings well. The couple decided to move to the Portland suburbs, far from the noise and hustle of the city. But for over a month now, they haven't been able to find a suitable house. Their realtor, Ginny, suggested they either consider options in another area or talk to her old friend, who has lived here a long time and knows all the houses. If anyone can help them, it would be him. The couple took her advice and arrived at Emmett Claimer's large, luxurious house in the wilderness. He graciously invited them inside. Emmett quickly deduced that John knows architecture. The mansion was built back in 1918, and Emmett had spent nearly 10 years restoring it. It's not easy to find a good house in these parts, so the conversation would be a long one. The couple was happy to stay for an early dinner with Emmett. First and foremost, he was curious why such a young couple wanted to leave the city. Sarah replied that she and John wanted to leave one painful story behind. They raised a toast to a new chapter in their lives. Later, Emmett gave the couple a small tour of the house, which houses many antique items, including weapons. Emmett explained that when workers were laying the foundation, they dug up all these things. Emmett sees this as a living chronicle of the house and its rich history. Sarah liked what she heard. She had always wanted to live in a house with character. Unexpectedly, Emmett offered the couple the opportunity to live in this mansion completely free of charge. Once this house had made Emmett happy, but now it had become just a building for him. Something had changed, and Emmett would be glad if someone else could find happiness here. John had drunk quite a bit, so he couldn't drive. As a hospitable host, Emmett offered the guests to stay the night and continue the conversation in the morning. They agreed. Of course, the owner's offer to live here for free was incredibly generous, but it sounded almost too good to be true. Still, the couple believes Emmett genuinely wants to help them. Upon waking up in the morning, they heard a car starting. It seemed Emmett had left, leaving them there alone. John and Sarah found a note in which Emmett wrote that he considered them a wonderful couple with a happy life ahead. Once Emmett too had been happy here with his family. Now he wanted to leave the past behind and give this house, along with everything inside it, to John and Sarah. But there was one simple condition: never go into the cellar. If they respect this condition, the house will remain theirs. It seemed like a small price to pay for a new life in such a luxurious mansion. However, John doesn't believe it can be that simple. At Emmett's request, Ginny, the realtor, had already prepared the contract, so this wasn't a joke. Everything would be official on paper. Sarah didn't share the husband's doubts, who couldn't understand why Emmett would give them the house. Sarah reminded him that they had invested all their savings in IVF, so now if the house were theirs for free, they could try to have a baby again. In the end, John relented, and they signed the contract. Ginny wished them luck. The couple embraced, hardly believing that they now owned a house they could never have afforded. It was the perfect place to start fresh. John was beginning to believe in it too. The couple moved their belongings here and began settling into the new place. For the first time since the tragedy, Sarah played the piano again. After some time, they hosted a housewarming party. All the guests admired the house. Incidentally, John's ex-girlfriend, Alyssa, also attended the party. She was invited by Zach, their colleague. And although Alyssa was very sweet, giving Sarah a jasmine flower, John still felt extremely nervous. Alyssa just wanted to make sure John was okay. She's always ready to help him, but he no longer wants anything to do with her. Their conversation was interrupted by John's boss, who asked him to step outside immediately. Everyone had already gathered outside, wondering who the strange man standing in the yard was. John approached him, asking if everything was all right. The man advised John to burn this house down before it was too late, as the price was far too high. Then the man simply left. The couple tried to forget about the incident. Sarah met a neighbor, Catherine Conrad. The women chatted for a bit. Catherine told Sarah she hoped they'd settle in well. As soon as John arrived at the office, his boss summoned him. It turned out that Alyssa had accused him of inappropriate behavior. While the investigation was ongoing, John would be suspended from work. He didn't know how to tell his wife. At home, Sarah told the husband about her intention to return to work. John still hadn't found the courage to tell her what had happened. It seemed their perfect life was falling apart. John stepped outside for some air, and his gaze fell on the cellar door. This reminded him of how at the party, guests had wondered what was inside. Alyssa was certain that sooner or later John wouldn't resist looking in. The next morning when Sarah left for work, John, as he'd been doing lately, went for a run. It had already been 2 weeks, and he still hadn't told his wife the truth, fearing it would shatter their idyll. John still hoped to talk things over with Alyssa and settle everything amicably, but his boss had said that was impossible. Even he was forbidden from speaking with John while the investigation was ongoing. John wanted to send Alyssa a message but changed his mind at the last moment. His gaze fell once again on the cellar door. Feeling like he had nothing left to lose, John tried to pick the lock, but it wasn't easy. Eventually he gave up on this hopeless endeavor. Over dinner, Sarah shared her plans to set up a nursery in the house. But John was clearly preoccupied with something else, and she couldn't help but notice. John said he wanted to know what was in the basement. After all, how would Emmett know if they'd gone in? Sarah reminded him of the contract terms. If they broke them, they risked losing their dream home. The next day, Sarah gave her students a lecture on the butterfly effect, how something insignificant can set off a chain of irreversible catastrophic events. Meanwhile, John left Alyssa a voicemail, asking her to call him back. Inside, John noticed a hidden door and contacted the city archives, requesting the house's blueprints. An archive worker mentioned that the previous owner of the house was Paul McManus. This came as an unpleasant surprise for John. The worker also informed him that around 25 years ago, Emmett Claimer's wife had run away from him in the middle of the night, taking their 5-year-old daughter. They hadn't been seen since. After studying the blueprints, John confirmed that the door led to the cellar and opened it. However, the floor was sealed with boards. While Sarah was lecturing her students on chaos theory, John retrieved his tools and pried up the floor, then descended into the cellar with a flashlight. Another obstacle stood in his way. Sarah arrived home and checked the mailbox, unsuspecting of anything. John managed to drill only a small hole. Hearing his wife return, he hurried back upstairs and pretended that nothing was happening. Sarah noticed that lately, John had been coming home from work early. Alyssa called at night. John asked her for a meeting. Alyssa said she'd be waiting for him tomorrow at 2 p.m. at their favorite place. As agreed, they met in the office's underground parking lot. John doesn't understand why Alyssa slandered him. She in turn called him a liar. John had been cheating on his wife all this time, promising Alyssa that they'd have a family together. John realizes he's at fault, but he has no intention of leaving his wife because he loves her. Alyssa threatened to tell Sarah everything. John's anxiety doesn't leave him for a second, while Sarah works on renovations. She's noticed that the husband has started going out for runs more often. For him, it's a way to distract himself. Suddenly Sarah felt nauseous and decided to take a pregnancy test, which came out positive. She was so happy, believing that this time everything would be all right. But her joy was clouded when she found house blueprints under the bed. Sarah realized that John, despite the owner's warning, had been down in the basement. Alyssa arrived at their home, intending to tell Sarah everything. At that time she had gone down to the basement. The flashlight's battery died almost immediately, so she had to go back upstairs. Alyssa entered the house without knocking. Not noticing her, Sarah went down to the cellar again, while Alyssa went upstairs and saw photos on the wall of a happy Sarah and John. Sarah encountered that same obstacle. It was clear that John had unsuccessfully tried to break it. Alyssa entered the nursery and saw the positive pregnancy test. She could barely contain her emotions. Hearing some sounds, Sarah hurried back. The front door was ajar. Learning that John had met with Alyssa, his boss said it had been a big mistake. Right now the best option for John would be to stay out of it. He saw Alyssa's car leaving their home and followed her. John returned home late. Sarah looked thoughtful. When John found out about the wife's pregnancy, he was overjoyed. But she said there was something else. John assured that he hadn't gone into the basement, although he had tried. He promised it wouldn't happen again. Sarah just wants to be sure she can trust her husband. Together they blocked off the basement entrance. Perhaps some secrets are better left undiscovered. Sarah approached decorating the nursery very responsibly, planning where to place the crib and changing table. John thinks she's starting to fuss too soon. Receiving a call from HR and learning that the investigation cleared him of any wrongdoing, John felt immense relief. Sarah overheard the conversation but didn't understand what it was about. John said it was just some work problems that were now resolved. The boss congratulated him on returning. Everyone in the office knew about Alyssa's infatuation, so nobody believed her tearful story. She hadn't shown up at work since last week. In the nursery, John noticed a bullet lodged in the wall and was about to call the police, but his wife started to dissuade him, believing there must be a reasonable explanation. John told her that Emmett's wife and daughter went missing 25 years ago. Sarah stood her ground, thinking the husband was jumping to conclusions. However, since then, she couldn't stop thinking about the cellar. Seeing detectives in the office, John asked the HR employee what had happened. It turned out that Alyssa's car had been found abandoned. Sarah met with Catherine Conrad at a bar, asking about the previous residents of the house. Catherine said that the house had gone through many owners. The last ones were the McManuses, who simply disappeared one day without saying goodbye. Catherine also mentioned that some time ago, she regularly crossed paths with John during her runs. This alarmed Sarah, as he was supposed to be at work at that time. The news was broadcasting a report about missing Alyssa Hayes. When Catherine stepped away to greet her yoga instructor, Sarah found an article online about the search for Alyssa. At dinner, Sarah asked John about it. He replied that the police had been at their office today, but no one knew anything. While John was in the shower, Sarah checked his laptop and saw an email from HR containing Alyssa's accusations against him. She also found an outgoing call to Alyssa on the husband's phone. John couldn't stop thinking about the bullet he found in the wall. It seemed to have been fired from an antique pistol in Emmett's collection. However, Sarah didn't want to hear about it, since they risked losing the house. She didn't believe Emmett had harmed his family and hidden their bodies in the cellar. Their argument was interrupted by the doorbell ringing. Standing there were Detective Stark and Detective Wayland, who wanted to speak with John. He didn't object and invited them inside. Sarah tried to keep her composure. The detectives wanted to speak with her husband alone. Sarah hid around the corner, eavesdropping on the conversation. John told the detectives that he had dated Alyssa in the past. After he decided to break up with her, she started making things up. John didn't deny that he had met with Alyssa the day before she disappeared to try to clarify things. But she agreed to withdraw her accusations only on the condition that they get back together. Sarah confirmed the husband's alibi, who claimed he was home on the day Alyssa disappeared. The detectives had no further questions for now and left. John tried to explain himself, telling his wife that he hadn't told her about the accusations because they were false. But Sarah was sure the husband had cheated on her. She had long suspected it but had turned a blind eye. The police likely suspect John in Alyssa's disappearance. But Sarah lied to the detectives not for him, but for the sake of their future child. Since moving into this house, everything has gone wrong. John is convinced the cellar hides a dark secret. He managed to find the new address of Paul McManus, the previous owner, on the internet. John went there immediately. They had met before at the housewarming party. Now Paul was struggling to cope with his divorce. He doubted that John was ready to learn the secret hidden in the cellar of the house. At first it seems like an ideal life at a very low price, but in reality it's a deal with the devil. This house ruined Paul's life, as he constantly felt he was living a lie. He wished he could burn the place down. But it's not even about the cellar or Emmett, it's about the people who hide dark secrets. While Sarah patched up the bullet hole in the wall, Paul said his biggest regret was not opening the cellar door. There's only one way to break this vicious cycle: to open it, against the contract's terms. John decided to do just that, but Sarah clearly had other plans. She was painting the nursery walls, believing in a bright future in this house. John shouted that it was just self-deception. Behind the facade of their perfect life lay an ugly truth. When John began breaking the lock on the cellar door, Sarah tried to stop him. But it didn't work, and she knocked her husband out. John woke up on the couch in the living room. Sarah said she couldn't let it happen. When you open a door, you need to be ready to see what's behind it. After those words, Sarah showed John Alyssa's phone. On that fateful day, Sarah had caught Alyssa in their house in the nursery, and pointed a gun at her, telling her to get out. Alyssa had said that everything here should have belonged to her, and that Sarah wasn't worthy of it. In a burst of emotion, Sarah took Alyssa's life. She justified her actions by saying she wanted to protect their perfect life. As a mathematician, Sarah had taken all probabilities into account, with all cause and effect relationships. This was the only option. Sarah hid the body in the cellar, then drove Alyssa's car away. John realized that it was actually his wife who had been driving Alyssa's car that day, managing to deceive him and shake him off her trail. Sarah also got rid of Alyssa's phone, planning everything out. Her only slip-up was leaving a bullet in the wall. John's reaction was predictable, and Sarah knew how to influence him. John intends to turn his wife over to the police. She pointed the gun at him, threatening that if it came to that, she would pin the crime on him. To the police, he's the perfect suspect. If John agrees to keep silent, their perfect life will go on. To Sarah, Alyssa is a minor sacrifice in exchange for the life she's always dreamed of. Now John has to make a choice. In the next scene, we see a party in the house in honor of the future child. It's very hard for John to pretend that everything is fine. Among the gifts, the couple found something from Emmett. He was expressing his gratitude for them turning this building into a family home. Emmett's gift was a key to the cellar. Whether to use it or not is up to them. However, Emmett is confident that the new residents already know what's inside. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.